From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 27. Today we got an awesome guest from the CSP Massachusetts staff as we dig deep on some of the results of our summer elite college pitcher development program at our Massachusetts facility. We're going to look really heavily at the synergy between training and pitching, and also dig deep on the concept of being really good with the basics to set athletes up for long-term success. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients to support your body's nutritional needs across 5 critical areas: energy, immunity, gut health, hormonal support, and healthy aging. I'm an avid user of Athletic Greens myself, in spite of the fact that I tend to be a supplement minimalist. To me, this is a product that is much more like whole food nutritional insurance as opposed to a true supplement. The ingredients have been carefully selected at the highest quality, most natural source. You get essential vitamins and minerals, digestive enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, and that's the zero compromise approach from the company. It's plant-based, sourced from whole foods at the highest quality, so you won't find harmful chemicals, artificial colors or flavors, preservatives, or added sugar. Really, it's perfect for folks who are gluten and dairy free, paleo, keto, vegan friendly, great for people who are intermittent fasting, all that fun stuff. Personally, I love it for obviously our athletes who don't get enough nutritional benefits from fruits and vegetables because they don't eat enough. So it's a way to kind of plug in holes in diets. But also I really like it for our college and professional athletes who may have complex travel schedules where quality food options aren't always at hand. On a personal level, I'm a husband, father of 3, and an entrepreneur. We split our time between 2 states, and I'm also still an avid lifter. So life is inherently crazy, and it can be stressful, and sleep deprivation is definitely something that we encounter. So I rely on Athletic Greens for part of my immune support, and believe firmly that it's made a big difference in keeping me healthy in spite of how crazy our lifestyle is. They've got a great offer in place. If you head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey, they'll get you 20 free travel packets with your purchase. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you can claim your special offer. Today's guest serves as a strength and conditioning coach and associated pitching coordinator at Cressey Sports Performance, Massachusetts. He was a 4-year varsity pitcher for Rutgers University and pitched in the Cape Cod Baseball League. He served as an intern at CSP Mass before coming on staff. And in addition to coaching at the high school level, he regularly travels to provide consulting services for various college baseball programs. He's also heavily involved with the professional baseball crew at CSP Mass. In today's talk, we actually go through the details of our college summer elite baseball development program, where he's intimately involved on the pitching onboarding and regular training. Please welcome to the show, Kyle Driscoll. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Awesome, Eric. Happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be another one of those awkward welcomes like when I had John on where he was literally like a mile away, and could have easily done it in person, but we did it over the phone to make it feel more authentic.
Oh, yeah. We're about 2 miles this time. Not too far.
Absolutely. So folks, got a little taste of what our college summer development program, basically is when I did your intro, but I think it's good to maybe describe the nitty gritty of the details of it. So, obviously, John and Drew and Cole and Andrew and myself handle a lot of the training, the actual evaluations physically. But let's talk a little bit about how you onboarded the pitchers in this program, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Yeah. So, this program is 3 years old. Christian and John and you and all the coaches about 3 years ago handled the first year. I was lucky enough to run the pitching side of it last year. So this is my second year doing it. So we were a little bit more experienced with the onboarding process. So it was a little bit more intensive, than it was a couple of years back. But it kind of just went as far as a few months ahead of time, kind of selling parents on the phone. Basically, one of the biggest things was getting all the general info on the applicants, just because it's a big group. So we had 42 athletes in this program, and it is a group program, right? So as being Cressey Sports Performance, right, a lot of the clients that we get are clients coming off of injuries, right? This program isn't really a fit for clients who need such high level individual one-on-one attention and individualized throwing programs. This is more of a program for healthier athletes who are trying to develop routines, gain velocity, develop pitches, and do it almost as a team and as a group. So part of the biggest thing as far as the onboarding process was making sure that every applicant was a fit.
Yeah.
So going from there, talking to them, getting all their general information, talking to parents, communicating the logistics of housing and filtering out the high maintenance clients. Once we kind of got our base 40, 42 athletes, we could kind of then go on to the next step of creating and sending out base level questionnaires to get all of their general background information.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said high maintenance. I think, it's important to define what that really means. That's not just like, hey, you sent long emails. That's more in the context of, hey, I had shoulder surgery 6 weeks ago. Can I join your throwing program? And it doesn't work. It's not scalable to have an actual throwing partner when you're in that situation. So probably good to like actually put an asterisk next to that. It's not just that we thought people were annoying if we put them out. It was that they weren't a good fit for developing alongside a guy who threw 30 innings in college ball and was like 100% ready to go and let it eat on the first day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Following that, right, I mentioned carrying out the questionnaires, making sure that every athlete was a fit, I guess on a health level and a throwing level, all the way up until getting those out, getting those back, and then the day they arrive. So all of that was pretty much pre-arrival of the athletes. Once they got there, as you mentioned, we have you, Drew, Andrew, Cole, and John doing our evals with these guys and getting all their base level testing as far as range of motion on the table, et cetera, et cetera. My side of things, with the help of Dakota Herman, who everybody knows as helping you with these podcasts and being such a big help at CSP, we would run the throwing side of things on the eval day. As I mentioned before, we had 42 guys in about a week. And this was on top of regular clients coming in and out of the gym, holding regular sessions with our throwing clients. So obviously that included working after hours, working on Sundays, trying to get all these guys in and out, and get their testing numbers from a pitching side on day one. So,
and that's an interesting observation in terms of volume. If you think about it, like, we were gung-ho going on all cylinders to onboard 42 guys. You think about what happens in a major league organization when, basically you have, 120 pitchers that all come back at the exact same time, like being able to get initial data on them, or even in college when, maybe a pitching staff's only 15 or 17 guys, but they might not have as large a support staff as we do to actually like onboard them. So I think it speaks volumes. Just the coach to athlete ratio is an important consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah, we always got to keep that locked in just because everybody needs to get the same attention from these kids coming in to, the Brian Lights who have been training on our gym for the last whoever knows how long and being so loyal to us. We just got to maintain that.
Absolutely.
Once they stepped in the cage, Dakota and I would kind of just watch their process. We would just want to see them naturally just to kind of see where their tendencies lie. And we'd let them warm up, do their band work, do their pre-throwing plyo care stuff, and kind of just see what they do to get ready to be on the mound. Because a lot of the time, that's where a lot is lost, I'd say, for a pitcher.
Yeah.
Being indoors in our cage, we were able to get them up on Rapsodo to get a bunch of different metrics. The main things I was looking at when we were getting these guys on Rapsodo day one was obviously velocity, spin rate of all their pitches, spin efficiency of their pitches, what spin access these pitches were on, and then the horizontal and vertical break of their stuff. And one of the biggest differences between this summer and last summer, in my opinion, and kind of what I needed to do, was presenting these athletes with their day one numbers. A lot of the time, as we saw on the questionnaires, right, these kids would list their velocities. It's a big question we asked. As a rule of thumb, I typically take 3 miles and off of what they write. So kids come in tend to think that they throw way harder than they really do. Not sure why. Not sure if they take their highest game that they've ever thrown at and list that as their average velocity. Not sure if they're getting fudge numbers from their roommates at school because their roommates don't want to hurt their feelings because they were on the gun. Yeah. I've been there. But it's really important to let these athletes know what they're throwing so that we can set realistic goals for the 10 weeks that they're here so that even when they do get better and hit those goals, that they didn't have some ridiculous number in their head where they feel like they just wasted 10 weeks.
Yeah, it's comparing apples and apples, right? So a lot of times you get an in-game velocity off a turf mound, or excuse me, off a dirt mound with cleats on, and in the heat of like the 7th inning with bases loaded where you're letting it eat. And a lot of times then they come to a turf mound indoors on Rapsodo with nobody in the box. So sometimes that's the case. So you always want to pre and post test, on the same dynamic. The other thing I was going to observe too is even before they step into the cage, one of the things that we've always done with those guys on day one is we want to see how they, even before they pick up any kind of band or baseball implement, whatever it may be, like I want to see like, all right, do they do foam rolling? Do they go through a dynamic flexibility series? Or is it just they show up and kind of go through a couple of like the classic, 5 arm circles and cross body stretch and then go to it. We see a lot of guys that just hop right on the mound and don't prepare their bodies for it.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much most common. I'd say of the 42 guys we saw, I honestly might have seen five kids foam roll.
Yeah,
but I definitely saw like 40 kids start throwing heavy baseballs at a wall before even warming up.
Yeah, and that's leads kind of my next question is obviously you went through all the onboarding stuff beyond just setting expectations and making sure that they were consistent with what guys had reported and what guys wanted to get out of this. What were some of the big surprises for you? Like where did they blow you out of the water in terms of what you saw on that first day?
First day surprises. I mean, as I kind of mentioned before, not really a surprise, but the lack of transparency between what they write down on their sheets and the questionnaires and what they look like first day. I can't tell you how many times like John would come up to me based off of a questionnaire and be like, "Hey, this guy's going to be an absolute stud. I can't wait to see him throw." Hops on the mound after not doing a warm up, so on and so forth, and is sitting like 78, 82. It's like, okay, cool. So we really kind of have to throw almost everything that was like before and throw that out the window and kind of just restart and just not hold too much weight on, the questionnaires we send out before time. Another thing that was kind of surprising, was we had a good amount of higher level arms in this program. We had a larger sample size. So kind of the arms kind of ranged from a high different level of play. And there really was like a big lack of consistency with pitches on the mound. And there was an overwhelming amount of underwhelming stuff, put it that way. Not too many guys were spinning the ball too high. I'd say 90% of guys had that average spin rate between like 1900 and 2100. There was one pitcher who was able to, have an above average spin on a breaking ball and a fastball. And that kind of reflects the goals that these athletes have been setting for themselves on the questionnaire and in person. And everybody's goal just leads towards, I want to throw harder. Every single athlete listed, I want to throw harder. The inability to set like goals for these pitchers is what I think was most surprising. No one came in wanting to develop a curveball, wanting to develop a changeup, wanting to become a better pitcher, have more pitchability. And a lot of the time when we change the focus or change the goal of what these athletes are trying to do, velocity tends to be a result of the efficient movement patterns that we're adding in order to change different metrics, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that was a stunning thing for me when I saw the pretest numbers. And I think maybe it's because, to some degree, the overwhelming majority of our work on Rapsodo, and it really kind of comes in the context of, working with pro guys, right? And we know pro guys can spin it at a really high level. And so I think we get a little bit duped in that regard, or you see a stud high school prospect, because a lot of the times we don't spend as much time with the 13 and 14-year-olds, in those metrics. So, I think it was just intriguing to see how many guys were thinking that they were actually pitching at an elite level. And they weren't like elite two-seamers when they walked in with 1800 spin rate fastballs. They were four seams that weren't doing what they were supposed to do. So, what are any other surprises that jumped out at you?
I'd say besides kind of what we just went over, the biggest thing besides that was the lack of routines, ideas behind what they're trying to do when they throw, ideas behind a warm-up, and then like shutdown and rest periods were so inconsistent across the board, as far as some people shutting down for 5 months versus a lot of people shutting down 2 years ago for 2 weeks. And this isn't stuff that is like mechanical or athleticism or stuff wise. This is just stuff that is they're just not aware of what they should be doing in order for their bodies to, rest, recover, and grow most efficiently. So that's the stuff that I think is actually easy to teach and something that's super valuable for them coming here for 10 weeks.
Absolutely. And, after you saw those initial onboarding bullpens, you were really meticulous about pairing up throwing partners. So what goes into that process for you?
Yeah, awesome. So I think that's such an important part of every level of baseball, whether it's starting when you're 12 years old, going through high school, going through college, and at the next level as well, is having a throwing partner that can challenge you and push you every single day, and you do the same for your partner. So this is something that I put a lot more time and effort into this year than I did last year. One, because again, we had a larger sample size, so it was a little bit more challenging to find these guys, but there's also more people that could match your throwing level. So I basically based these throwing partners off of a few different metrics that were completely subjective to what I saw. And a few of those things were relative velocity compared to each one of them where they were at, body composition, what their goals were on that front, perceived potential, in my opinion, like where could this kid be? Where is this guy going to be at the end of this 10 weeks compared to who I might pair him up with? And something else is basically what is their routine pre-throwing? And are they a hard worker? Are they a raw talent kid who doesn't seem like he's ever worked hard? Are they somebody who might have reached their talent level but puts in all the work and all the effort? We also had a range of, I think, 17-year-olds all the way through 22-year-olds. So even on day one, you can tell who is going to be a little bit more of a leader and a role player in this group compared to the younger, more immature athletes. And it was really important to even take that into effect when pairing up these throwing partners, because every single day these guys are out there with each other. And if they're not pushing each other to get better with every single throw, then they're going to end up getting worse with every single throw, and it's going to be almost a waste of time.
So when you spoke a little bit to it, but give us a feel for some of the variability across the population of pitchers that came in here, like everything from age to, training history to, their actual velocity and stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is called our Elite College Development Program. But every year there's been a few exceptions that we've made for some higher level high school arms coming into the program. Arms that we see have the potential to get recruited, play at the next level, and develop a lot this summer. So that's one of the guys who come in, 17-year-olds who are really just striving to play at the next level. And the thing about them is they're a little bit younger, right? They're a little bit more immature. Mm-hmm. We have guys coming off of 100 plus inning years with their colleges. We have guys who are coming off of pitching only 2 innings with their respective colleges. We do have some guys who are coming off of rehabbing stints, coming off of injuries. We've got a bunch of guys who are coming off of like that 30 to 45 innings pitched for their year, bouncing between bullpen outings and spot starts. Every now and then we get a two-way guy who is like secondary pitching, but just coming in to get his work in as a position player. Those are interesting. We've had a couple guys who come in who are playing for summer ball teams as well, so we got to balance that schedule as far as them going out to Worcester and playing for the Bravehearts, and balancing getting in our throwing with our summer program and not messing too much with their throwing partner.
Yep.
Because these guys should be on the same schedule, so on and so forth. And then we've also had a few college arms who are like balancing taking classes at BC, so we got to work around that. So it's really interesting to have to find a way to balance all of those different individuals and their schedules and kind of hold the mold of what we're trying to do and have the same routine for the whole group throughout the summer.
Yeah, we have an old saying, like every hour of training takes about an hour of preparation, and this program is a really good example. You spoke to the variability across the population of pitchers, and I think that's an important maybe jumping off point for the next question, and that's that. And I'll give you like a brief story. Is one of the things that I do down at our Florida facility, whatever I possibly can, is when we have like a high school junior or a senior who's got some good potential that I think needs, a little bit of kind of like an aha moment, I'll have them come out and throw with our pro guys. And invariably, like there's like a Monday in January or February where normally they would be in school, but it's a holiday. So maybe they come out and throw on Monday with the guys. And one of the most like impressive thing I think for a high school kid to see is how little pro guys screw around when they throw. Like there's intent on every single throw. They're not like, basically chatting a ton with each other. They're really actually getting like attention to detail on every rep. So that's a huge, obviously priority for high school guys, is taking advantage of catch play. Like, what did you see like a difference between, the advanced high school kids versus, the college guys that were in there? Were there certain priorities that were highest, for different populations as you were going with the program?
Yeah. So, I think that's a really good point, and something that is so obvious between what sets aside our high school versus college versus pro arms, which is what you said, is just how meticulous our pro guys are when they throw, and how more serious our college guys are when they throw than our high school guys, how much more serious our high school guys are than our middle schoolers, and all the way down the chain. So, I mean, that definitely comes with maturity and level of play. And we definitely had some of our older guys in the program, which were a lot more serious than some of our younger guys. But basically what you're asking is kind of like, what was the approach as far as like starting off the throwing programs with these guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. So, kind of the first couple weeks is really interesting, on that front, because as we mentioned, we have so many guys coming in from so many different places off of so many different, schedules and routines. And, the first couple weeks is really important to get to know your throwing partner, get to know me, create a relationship with me, Dakota, the strength coaches at the gym. And they're all also being introduced to a whole new style of training and a really high intensity level, high schedule. They're doing a lot more than they normally have. So the first few weeks of throwing, and my biggest thing is taking out their pre-throwing plyo care work, whether it was good or bad. People are falling into routines with those, and most of what I saw on day one with the pre-throwing plyo care balls was pretty offensive.
And that's not to say it's not a bad implement. Like, we like Kyle and the guys at Driveline. They've been really supportive of us, but it's how you use that implement. It's like anything else. You can make a barbell look really, really bad too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just think with 42 guys, teaching them how to throw weighted baseballs would take too much time on week one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So take those out for the first couple weeks. We re-implement them in week 4. We had I'd say 42 guys. We probably had 39 guys throwing pre-thrown plyo care balls and weighted balls after their pens, as a really key component of what we did with our guys this summer in order to build velo. In the first couple weeks, we took those out, introduced them to their throwing partners, introduced some simple drill work, beginning of throwing, and kind of just allowed them to be athletic and move their feet during catch play. That was really important to me in the first couple weeks, and it was almost like all coaching aside, besides the simple drill work and allowing them to be athletic and just watching them do what they do and seeing how they act when put into a new throwing program and a new atmosphere with a whole bunch of new people. Once I was able to kind of get a grasp of who these kids are and what they're doing, I was able to kind of start coaching a little bit more. And I'm so fortunate to be where I am as a pitching coach, to have what you do with your strength staff and what John's doing as the director here at CSP with all the strength coaches, in that I know that their training is top notch and their positions in the weight room are unbelievable. And that just makes my job as a pitching coach so much easier, because those positions in the weight room transfer directly to what they're doing as a pitcher.
Absolutely.
So it makes it's so easy for me to relate a back hip load to like a one leg deadlift, just because I know that their deadlift form is being worked on in the right way. Right. So as far as like what I would start early on for pitching mechanics, it always starts from the ground up, just as it does in the weight room. If you're putting yourself, so first step for pretty much everybody would be learning how to load your back hip and having good direction and tension on your back leg. Right. If you can't do step number 1 the right way, you're going to put yourself behind the starting line, and you're going to put yourself in a hard position to get into better positions down the chain, right?
Yeah.
So with every athlete and every client that we threw with this summer, step number 1 was learning how to load your back hip, learning how to have good direction down the mound. Step 1 typically leads to everything else or other things falling into place down the line. which in turn makes my job a little bit easier.
Absolutely. One of the things that I was actually thinking about earlier on is, as you described, basically the different guys that come to the program. I had a conversation with a pro guy who came in, probably a week and a half ago was one of our initial off-season evaluations. And he had a line that felt so compelling to me. And he said, my college training was ridiculous and excessive. My pro training has been ridiculous and insufficient. And I think, we see a lot of college guys who get thrown into scenarios where it's like build mental toughness and, they're getting run into the ground throughout the fall, or they show up to campus and, the entire program is put on an extreme long toss and weighted ball program without necessarily the details being sorted out in terms of direction or mechanical efficiencies or all those things. And,
Yep.
There's something to be said where a lot of times the pro guys are much more pristine in that regard. So we can push the volume and, get them away from kind of some of the foo-foo programs that they traditionally have. Whereas on the college side, a lot of times they're actually probably doing less work than they've historically done. It's more intensive work. It's more directed work. It's quality effectively over quantity. But at the same time, within that program, you have guys who haven't really done anything. So you have a scenario where some people are building work capacity, and some people are effectively they're working with their work capacity to get in more high quality work.
Oh yeah.
What were the most common key takeaways for the pitchers? And obviously we'll get to some of the quantifiable results in the next little bit, over the course of the 10 weeks. But what did you see them taking away in terms of, really important, I guess, mental cues or, stuff like that maybe isn't quite as objective and is more subjective?
Cool. Yeah, for sure. So, obviously the mechanical changes, differ so much between each individual pitcher, kind of just based off of how they perceive coaching and whether they're auditory learners, visual learners, kind of stuff like that, whether they're like internal cues, external cues. So the cues that went into changing these deliveries are so across the board that it's really hard to list. The biggest takeaways, I think, are more process oriented for these guys. They were here for 10 weeks and they had us, writing their programs, scheduling out their months and weeks and days to the point where there was such a synergy between training and throwing to the point where it merged as to one, and you were able to grow in both sectors individually, which they saw how that led to such progressions on the mound, right? I've been talking to them after they've left already and communicating with them during the fall as well. The fact that they all have the ability to have a routine and have a process behind what they're doing, especially with a baseball in their hand, is huge to them. Knowing what they're doing, as you said, with our pro guys, having a focus and having some sort of intent behind every and each individual throw is huge. Another piece of what was lacking when they came in and what they understand at this point moving forward is when they need to take shutdown periods to recover and rest and get stronger, how to ramp up and introduce themselves to mound stress during a return to throw program. How to manage your arm during a season and how to react to arm pain and soreness, how to take care of that, when to go see a manual therapist or when to just, take it easy for the day. And even to the point, when to shut it down for a couple of weeks and really just listen to your body. Besides the throwing process part of that, I think understanding the fact that you can train and pitch all year round.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
Is really, really important for these kids because a lot of the time, and as a former player, once I would hit season, I really wouldn't focus on lifting and I would get weaker and I'd get fat and I'd eat fast food and I'd get worse. And look at that, I got hurt, and I'm sure that's the same pattern with so many athletes who end up getting hurt is they tend to ramp one up with ramping the other side too much down and really just taking a break from training, and that ends up being pretty detrimental in their careers.
Absolutely. And it leads to my next question because, we're really big at CSP about making sure that the synergy between training and pitching is really, really locked in. And it's something I think we take a lot of pride in. We, incorporate a high-low model, which John touched on a little bit in his podcast a few weeks ago, where it's, there's peaks in stress and then they're followed by subsequent low periods so that there's a level of compensation that can occur so you get some adaptation. And that's really, really easy to do on the training side of things. But what people don't realize is that, when these athletes are, especially as they got towards the end of the program, they're neurologically efficient, right? Less than 1% of the population is throwing, greater than 90 miles an hour and all that. So that's a CNS intensive stressor that needs to be taken into account. And certainly, a max effort bullpen or extreme weighted ball, kind of a like protocol is going to be a lot different than just playing catch at 60 feet. But, speak a little bit to the synergy between training and pitching, how you structured the pitching side of things in the context of what we did in the strength and conditioning world.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, as you touched on right there, throwing is a pretty stressful action. And it's not like in basketball, you can go shoot 1,000 free throws in a day, every single day, and get better at them. In baseball, you can't do that. There's pretty much 2 or 3 days a week where you can actually let it eat. And the high-low model is a little bit, I'd say, wider range as far as perceived exertion throughout the week. As if you're throwing 90 to 100% one day, you're going to have to drop it down to 40% or even take the next day off from throwing. When in the weight room, you can hit a 90% deadlift one day, and then you can go and train upper the next day at like 60% effort level. So I'd say overall, your stress levels in the weight room can be a little bit more consistent, anywhere from like 50% effort to 100. Mm-hmm. The range of throwing throughout the week needs to range all the way from 100 to 0. So there needs to be a couple off days in the week. We typically are scheduling 2 complete off days from throwing in the week. Typically either right before or right after a very intense, heavy throwing day. And our throwing days are also, in the beginning of the week, they are consolidated with our heavy lower days in the weight room. So you're consolidating the stressors between the two in order for your next day to be an active, full recovery day, along with being low level in the weight room and low throwing. So it's just really important to pair the two between a high, medium, low, medium, high, low day of the week of throwing.
Absolutely. And you're a big believer that pitchers can get better without a baseball in their hands. And I think, it's a good thing to piggyback on the synergy discussion. Obviously, we spoke with respect to throwing specific things that you could do, whether it's, improving direction or cleaning up warm-ups, things like that. But give me some examples of where you see pitchers, missing out on opportunities to get better when the baseball isn't even in their hands.
Cool. Yeah. So, this is an interesting topic, that could be talked a lot upon. Simply put, I think there's so much out there today, whether good or bad, on the internet, on Instagram, on Twitter, to the point where if you're not like a mature athlete, right, which is most of our pro guys who are really like set in their patterns, who know their routines, you could see something on the internet and think that it benefits you and just go do it, whether it has any correlation to you throwing a baseball or not. Where we were really fortunate this summer is having complete control of all variables in the process for these guys. So we saw them every single day. We saw what they were doing. We saw what they do with a baseball in their hand. We saw what they do without a baseball in their hand. If we see something that is excessive, and I'm going to use the term eyewash, we can shut that down real quick and kind of just implement what we see that actually carries over into throwing a baseball. So a lot of what we do, and the biggest thing for me as far as getting better without a baseball in your hand, is being on a good strength program. Being on a good strength program teaches you how to be strong in the right positions, right? If you're strong in the right positions, you're going to be in the right positions throughout your pitching delivery, right? Mm-hmm. Those positions that you learn in the weight room should be the same positions that you touch upon in your pitching delivery. And if you're strong in those positions, then your body is going to take the path of least resistance down the mound and be most efficient and strong in those positions so that you can repeat yourself for longer periods of time. And that way you can stay healthier for longer. And everybody knows the pitchers who stay healthy are the pitchers who throw.
Absolutely.
Right?
So two things I would say. First off, we're episode 27, and that was the first mention of eyewash. So you've earned that accolade
Love it.
in the
That's
world.
huge.
Nicely done. The second thing is, so on like your Instagram, you've done some really, really good like freeze frames with guys where you highlight critical instance in the pitching delivery. Just so that people can conceptually maybe appreciate what you're talking about in that context. Give us a little feel for maybe frame by frame during the delivery, those critical instance, and then talk about something in the weight room that allows people to actually get to those positions more effectively.
Absolutely. Awesome. So, going through the delivery, and basically there's 4 positions that I'm looking for. Position 1 is a back hip load, right? So a back hip load in a pitching delivery is super important. One, to create direction, right? You're trying to throw a ball to the catcher. So you're moving in 3 different planes of motion. It's really important to have the most efficient direction possible in order to transfer that energy into the baseball. So a back hip load is important for 1, direction, and 2, tension. So you need tension on that back leg in order to secure your hips so your upper half can freely rotate and move around your hips. And a position that leads directly to that is a deadlift, right? So if you're deadlifting and you look at a good deadlift about a quarter of the way into it, right? So you're about a quarter of the way lowering into a deadlift, and you pause that position and you pick up 1 leg, okay? So that is exactly the loaded position I'm looking for in a pitching delivery. And that's pretty much the exact way I relate it to the clients. And the ones who train at CSP pick up on it like that, like right away. It makes so much sense. It sounds like common sense, which is all we're looking for these pitchers.
Yeah.
Say it again.
I was just going to say that hip load is critical. And you have to remember, people do it differently. Like some guys have really aggressive hip flexion. They sink very, very deep. So like Tim Collins is obviously one of our guys who's smaller and needs to generate a lot more force from his lower half. So he tends to ride that hip out with a lot more flexion, versus guys that you look at like a Blake Trinan. Trinan has a good hip load, but it's subtle. It's not an extreme thing where he sinks way back into it. And, but I always talk about the hip load. It's a strategy for holding off, trailing hip rotation, right? You want to basically be in there as long as you possibly can so that you can project, basically forward force into that blocking on the lead leg.
Absolutely.
So what's your second instant?
Second position is glove break. So where the pitcher gets to at glove extension, right, as they're riding that hip down the mound. So the biggest thing for me in this position is, so I'm using quotations with my hands right now. Staying closed is basically how it's coached and perceived across the field, which I guess the words make sense, but the way it's perceived, I feel like has gotten away from the actual meaning of it. If your thumb is pointed down to the ground on your glove side, regardless of where your hand is at, if you're a righty and it's pointing to third base, you're too closed, because at that point, in order to get back on track, you're going to have to pull open with your glove, and that's going to start the rotation process early with your upper half. And that leads to lack of separation at front foot strike, and which, leads to bad things. If you can keep your glove side directional with your thumb down, that means your wrist is pronated, your glove side wrist is pronated, which means the shoulder will be internally rotated, which means the rib cage is internally rotated, and that allows you to, quote unquote, stay closed and load your trunk a little bit more towards your throwing side. So if you're a righty, that allows you to get into more right trunk load as you're riding down the mound, which we all know increases separation and torque and power in the upper half and allows you to move a little bit more free and easy and more as a unit down the mound.
That's great. Now what's your next step?
The next position is where you're at front foot strike. So it's really important to have your throwing hand above your elbow within about 110 to 80 degrees of elbow flexion at front foot strike. Now, it's hard to visualize what that might look like. It is all over my Instagram at Big Drisk with 2 Ks. So BIGDRISKK. Check it out. Anyways, really important because that is the position where you want to drive layback with your hand, because that's where rotation is going to start your layback. If your hand is outside that 110 degrees of elbow flexion at front foot strike, you're in some sort of pronation with your hand, which is going to drive anterior glide of the shoulder, right? Which is small room for error there, and a lot of important things running through that part of your shoulder, right? And that can drive shoulder pain, elbow pain, and again, a lot of bad things happening at that point. So, and again, things that lead to that position are going to be poor direction and a poor glove side, right? So if you start early on in the process and you control number 1, control number 2, chances are that position is going to be a lot better in that athlete.
Absolutely. And then even just that front foot strike leads into the discussion of front hip pullback. And I think one of the big mistakes that we see with athletes, right, is they see still frame photos, and they think that as long as they're knee hyperextension, that they're doing what they need to, or as long as the front leg is straight. In reality, it's not a knee dominant strategy. It's a hip dominant strategy. So speak a little bit with respect to how you coach that, as well as, what we see in the weight room that really drives success in that position.
Absolutely. Yeah. So front foot strike, is huge, right? Because a lot of the time, and I also heard this on the Trinan podcast, which is awesome because it's something that I've tried to be communicating with the athletes for a while now, is you can't really drive hand speed until that front hip initiates that movement forward with your trunk. Simply put, like you mentioned, it's not a knee dominant strategy, right? So once that front foot hits and has ground contact and is weight bearing, is the point where you want to initiate that front hip. Two ways I put it. It's either pulling back, right, which in turn pulls the knee back. So the knee is moving because the hip is pulling back. Or the other way to put it, which typically hitters react to this a little bit better, is driving that back hip into your front hip, right? Because that also forces that hip to pull back, whether you are thinking about pulling it back or not. And what that does is it allows you to throw your trunk into flexion, right, which allows your throwing arm to upwardly rotate over and through your body. It's almost like a catapult, right? And that's the most efficient and honestly healthy way for you to throw, is to allow that trunk to get into flexion over your front side, which allows your arm to carry through and drive the most hand speed out in front. Stuff that we'll do with our athletes in order to feel these positions, a lot of it relates right to med ball work, because you take a baseball out of these kids' hands, most of them are athletes, and they'll be able to figure it out without a baseball because you're removing them from their sport in which they're so patterned in. So if you can teach them how to throw a good med ball, whether it's a scoop toss or a shot put, then chances are you're going to be able to teach them how to translate that to having a baseball in their hand.
That's a great point. Now let's talk a little bit more subjective as we get further along here. So you did, certainly a lot of pitch design work. That's certainly a hot topic in the world of baseball. What kind of trends did you see on this front where guys had the most success in terms of either refining pitches or adding a new pitch altogether?
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, there are a couple trends, I'd say, as far as the whole group. As we mentioned before, lack of ability to just pull down and spin a baseball. So we worked on that with a bunch of our guys. A lot of the time that's more of a reflection of the work they put in the weight room, paired with, some long toss, some pull down, stuff like that. I'd say a lot of the trends led to lack of ability for feel of a changeup, which is interesting to me just because I think at this point, in my career at CSP, the changeup has honestly been the easiest pitch to coach. I think it's really important to get that middle finger to a point on the baseball where you have feel for a seam. And a lot of the time, heavy pronation is coached on changeups, and that may work for a lot of people. But the easiest way to feel it is to stay behind the baseball and let that middle finger be on that baseball last. So you can feel it roll off that seam, off that middle finger, because you naturally pronate out in front with a baseball in your hand. So you don't have to actively think about pronating in order to get that feel of a changeup. And the grip is what changes the spin axis and the spin rate and the spin efficiency of the changeup, so that you can let all of that go to work, which gives you the action that you're desiring of a changeup.
And I would even say, sorry, not to cut you off, but I would even say, I wonder if part of the success that's happened in-house is that, you think about it this way, if you look at TrackMan numbers on guys, generally speaking, the changeup is, it's among the highest extension pitches, right? It's the one where you stay on the baseball the longest time, alongside the fastball and usually the breaking stuff and will be a little bit lower down. So, do you think that in a lot of ways people perceive, over pronating, like treating it really, really aggressive, as a way to stay on the baseball longer, when in reality they should be riding the rest of their body out longer and staying on that middle finger long enough for it to actually take place?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because I think it is perceived as if turning it over might allow you to stay on it longer. But when you actually, say you have slow motion camera and you take a video of yourself doing that, you'll actually see that you have to give up rotation and pull off early in order to actually fully pronate through that baseball if you're actively trying to turn it over.
And good hitters will see that too. It's the other thing you don't realize is that
Yeah.
you want it to look exactly like a fastball when it comes out. If you're aggressively pronating it earlier, it's going to come out exactly different.
Totally agree. The changeup needs to be an intent pitch out in front with the same speed as your handball, as your fastball, right? And if you can pick up on somebody coming off, coming around, or slowing up on a changeup, it totally defeats the purpose of it.
And so obviously that's pitch design stuff. Other ones that you saw as really being more pronounced beyond just the changeup?
There was a couple interesting cases where we had some higher level arms who didn't feel great with their four seam, but have been told to throw four seams because it's a good pitch. And this is where the Rapsodo allows the data to kind of analyze what type of pitcher you really are. Because we would get on the Rapsodo in week 7 and see that their four-seam fastball has, a 90% spin efficiency at an average spin rate, and it's 84 to 86 miles an hour. And so say it was spinning at 2100 at 84, 86. We had a lefty who was doing that. Said, all right, cool, hold the ball this way, throw a two-seam. Two-seam, spinning at 25 to 2600 at 89, 91. All right, what's the difference? That happened with 2 of our guys this summer. Totally wild, but it allows us to be like, okay, so you're not a four-seam pitcher. Like, even us trying to teach you how to have feel for a four-seam out in front could take away from your elite level two-seam right now.
Yeah.
Because that is an elite level two-seam. So having the Rapsodo is huge as far as not just letting my eyes, because I can see, if we can see it, we can relay it, but you don't know how much an athlete is going to buy into what you say and what you see. If you have a piece of technology telling them the exact numbers, they're going to buy in a lot quicker.
Yeah, and honestly, some guy named Corey Kluber turned out pretty good when he switched from a four-seam to a two-seam. For him, it was a scenario, and he talked about it on the first podcast, it was something that he could command better. For whatever reason, we've always been taught that a four-seam should spin higher, and, for sure it should, it certainly be easier to command, but that isn't the case for all athletes. What about with respect to the breaking stuff? What were some of the common trends you saw with guys in terms of, when they didn't have an ability to spin an elite curveball or slider? What were the trends on the college side?
Cool. Yeah. So a lot of the time, guys tend to try to do too much. Obviously, as we've mentioned, it's a new age of, I need to throw as hard as I possibly can, and I need to spin a breaking ball as hard as I possibly can, which that's great. You should be chasing velocity. You should be trying to spin the heck out of a breaking ball. But I think these things get lost in translation as far as C-Check throws a loopy slider, right? But it's nasty and he doesn't come too much underneath of it. So it's not a cement mixer, right? He has feel for getting to the front of the baseball while still being somewhat on the side of it. A lot of our guys end up coming underneath baseballs in order to try and manipulate them and try and get them to break, being too much on the side of baseballs. So a lot of the time it's really just finding a seam with your dominant finger on a breaking ball that's typically your middle finger, and just getting to the front of that baseball. A lot of the times, snapping is a way to get people to feel some tension. We'll slow guys down a lot and try and just have them nice and easy spin balls out in front to their partner before they start playing catch, stuff like that. And breaking balls tend to clean up as long as you have a little bit more direction and idea of what you're trying to do with them.
For sure. So everybody, we'll save the best question for last. Is everyone always cares about velo. And I think velo is, what I always hate is when people are like, what's the average velo gain? And if you look at average in this world, that's the single stupidest thing you can do, right? Do you want to give Chris Sale or Jake Arrieta average mechanics, or even Scherzer, right? Max has some unique things that he does in his delivery. He's probably the best pitcher on the planet right now. So I'm very cognizant about answering the average question. And a lot of times you're better off looking at the median as opposed to the mean, because it's not incredibly telling to take someone who threw 61 on day one and get him to 78 and basically pat yourself on the back, because a lot of times those are newbie gains. Those are things that get changed in a single throwing session. So I always look at what are the outliers, like who are the big jumps that took, and we know that it takes a lot more to go from 90 to 94 than it does to go from 76 to 80. So talk a little about the average in spite of that, but also maybe highlight some of the unique cases that you saw.
So that's actually a really interesting and awesome point, because typically averages get super lowered by the outliers, which is what happened last summer, right? I think the total average gain velocity was somewhere in the 2s. with some people gaining as much as, the lower arms. The guys who came in at 64, gaining 12 miles an hour. The guys who came in at 88, gaining 1 to 2. That's where those numbers get kind of thrown off. This summer, the average velocity gained was like 3.79. Okay, so call it 4 miles an hour. When we removed the top 5 and the bottom 5 from that test subject group, the average gained velocity was still 4 miles an hour.
So it's consistent,
which was really, really cool to see.
Yep.
Super consistent. Some of the biggest jumps we saw, there was a couple kids. There were 2 kids who came in like 83, 85, who left 89, 92, which was awesome. We did have, so it was the same as last summer, as in not a single person hit a 90 on day 1.
Yeah.
Both summers. Last summer, we had 2 out of the 24 being above 90 when they left, with multiple hitting 90 after they left in the fall or in their spring seasons. This summer, we had 9 athletes above 90 and some up to 93, 94 miles an hour.
And I want to make a really important differentiation on this. This is 90 miles per hour off the mound. Nope. Yep. Like your running gun, if it hits 90, you don't throw 90. You probably throw 84, 85. So I think that's a really important differentiation to make. Like, these are mound velocities. These are the things that we're actually looking for in game.
Yep, absolutely. And this is day 1 indoors versus week 10 indoors as well. We did get our guys outside versus live hitters in weeks 7, 8, and 9. But as far as our testing numbers, we're relating those numbers to relative, and so we can just control the numbers as far as both being in the same cage on the same mounds with the same rep soto at the same distance with no batters in the box.
That's awesome. And, I think that, there's one that stands out in particular for me. There was a 5'10" lefty that came in at 89 and left at 93.7. And I was like, that's a huge deal. Like 4.7 ticks in 10 weeks, for a guy right there. That takes you from, a guy that's, chasing some innings in the bullpen to being like a very legitimate arm, that can contribute. So I think, if there's no other message that folks take from this is like, don't just chase averages, chase outliers, look at your data set as a whole. It's kind of like when you see like a functional movement screen, right? Like if somebody's like, I got a 18, but they had 2 tests that were zeros, like that's bad news. You don't want that. So, these are good lessons to take forward. So, this is super helpful. Hopefully kind of gives people a little glimpse into what we do, during this 10-week program and, a snapshot. And, I think the other thing too is what I noticed certainly last year, and we're kind of like waiting on this for this year, is invariably you'll get those 4 to 5 guys that, we pushed them really, really hard throughout the program. They get a little deload at the end of it, and then they go back to college ball and their first inter squad, their first live BP, whatever it is, you see the velocity jump. So some guys super compensate a little bit later. And it kind of speaks to that like fatigue masks fitness model. So those are always important things to look at as well.
Oh yeah. I'm still waiting on texts from these guys and they're sending them on how they're doing in the fall, and it's really fun to follow and watch.
That's awesome. Well, Kyle, this is really, really cool. Folks can find you on Instagram at Big Drisk, DRISKK. Lots of really good, basically not just video stuff, but also freeze frame photos and educational stuff. And then we finally got you active on Twitter, and you've been pretty good there. It's at KDrisk, DRISC35. So they can follow you on both of those and get some good info. Really appreciate you taking the time and coming on.
Awesome, Eric. Thanks for having me.
You got it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.